This module will focus on some of the considerations we should make as educators when we teach students with more significant disabilities. I want to start with a quote from an important study that certainly guided me as an educator. Instead of demonstrating that bilingualism impedes language acquisition under conditions of impairment, the children in this study showed that they had the ability to learn 2 languages despite their impairment. I often feel very grateful that my first experience as a teacher was in a classroom for students with significant disabilities, all of whom happened to be bilingual. Before anyone could tell me differently, I knew through these 12 amazing case studies that were my first class that each of them, despite their disability, could celebrate knowing 2 languages, being part of 2 cultures, and that by no means did their disability prevent them from doing so. I share that because I think we have important responsibilities as educators to stand up and advocate in addition to teaching our students. And many people, including other educators, don't know this research in the way that we know it and often question, should we be exposing a student with a significant disability to multiple languages? Will that confuse them? And questions that I recognize may seem intuitive, but yet the research disproves. And so we want to ensure that regardless of disability or severity, that our families, our colleagues know that that would not prevent a child from learning a second language. In addition, unfortunately, we still have colleagues who question what should be taught to students with more significant disabilities, and unfortunately sometimes think that the bar should be lowered. And so I want to share something that was shared with me early on in my teaching career called the Literacy Bill of Rights, so that you can keep this in mind when you teach students with more significant disabilities. All students have the right to opportunity to learn to read and write, the right to have accessible, clear, meaningful, culturally and linguistically appropriate texts, the right to interact with others while reading, writing, or listening to text, the right to life choices made available through reading and writing competencies, to lifelong educational opportunities incorporating literacy, to have teachers and service providers who are knowledgeable about literacy instruction methods and principles, and to live and learn in environments that provide varied models of print. Thank you for keeping that in mind as we think about how and what we will teach our students with significant disabilities. Now, things to consider. I want to recognize that there are unique challenges to teaching students with more significant disabilities. This image is when a group of us speech pathologists actually went down to Bolivia and were working with students with very significant disabilities. And in this case, the boy had both cognitive and physical disabilities. So something to keep in mind is that many of our students with significant disabilities may become passive learners, not because they're not interested, but when they have difficulty communicating, interacting, or understanding what is going on around them, or even physically being in a position to engage with another person, it can lead to this passivity. So we have to think about how we will increase the cognitive engagement for all our students. You know, if we recognize that this passivity has potential to occur, we know that learning will be less likely. So what are we going to put in place to ensure that doesn't happen? We have to go beyond just the choice making or putting students in sort of coast mode where we say, okay, we're going to start this activity, and at the very beginning, do you want this book or this book? Do you want this song or that song? The choice making is a good start, but students need to be engaged beyond the start of the activity, but through the lesson. Thankfully, as educators, there is a great amount of research about literacy instruction. We are grateful to have had the National Reading Panel lay out the 5 pillars, foundations of literacy: phonemic awareness, phonics, vocabulary, fluency, and comprehension. These are great structures to focus on for many of our students. However, when we're teaching students with significant disabilities, we often need to find the layer beneath that foundation and the smaller steps to measure the success and growth of our emergent literacy readers with significant disabilities. So I like to think about not just the Fab Five, but the Thrilling Three, and thinking about the National Early Literacy Panel that came out just a few years after the original report. And so we can really think about those elements that need to be in place even before we move into the foundations. So oral language, the phonological awareness, and print knowledge concepts. By starting here, we can ensure to lay the necessary groundwork for our students with more significant disabilities. So, what's great is that the research shows us that interactive phonemic awareness works across different groups. So we have seen this perhaps already be effective with our students without disabilities and our students with more mild disabilities. But the research says across age groups, across SES backgrounds, and across ability levels that doing phonemic awareness intervention has great benefits. So let's put this to use for our students with significant disabilities as well. The intervention of phonemic awareness works best when it's explicit, focused down to 1 or 2 activities, and is done in small groups. What's great is that for those of you who are clinicians and therapists, this is precisely the time and structure of how we do most of our therapy sessions. So in conclusion, I've shared some additional references, but please do keep in mind ensuring that our students with more significant disabilities don't become passive learners, but we keep them engaged by ensuring that we don't just try to skip steps and keep up with a certain pace, but rather ensuring that they have exposure to all those key elements to lay the groundwork for the later foundation.